Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today let's talk about Us. So Us, as you know, is Jordan Peele's second film in the horror genre. The first, of course, being Get Out, which saw critical acclaim and went on to winning him an Oscar, and of course catapulting him to the top of the up-and-coming directors list, right? I've not seen Get Out just yet, but I'll be sure to check it out on seeing this film, and for the most part having enjoyed it. No, I will say that the film in its entirety I found to be more disturbing than actually being scary, which in and of itself works for the film as well as against it to some extent. And I mean, we started out with the family, of course, at a fair in Santa Cruz, and the little girl accompanying them, who I had to look up her name, Madison Curry, and I had to look up her name because I was so impressed with what she did in the film, but I will get back to that. All right, so we started out with Madison and her family, and who's playing a younger version of LupitaNyong'o's character, Adelaide, right? So we start with Adelaide's family, and we see where she eventually wanders off from her family and gets lost in a house of mirrors at the fair. And in the House of Mirrors, she of course encounters this entity who we later on learn to be called the Tethered, right? On encountering the Tethered, we flash forward to the future where Adelaide has returned to Santa Cruz on vacation with her husband and two kids. And of course, she's still very much traumatized by the events of what happened to her, the entity that she encountered in the House of Mirrors, and she of course was a bit uneasy about returning here. Of course, later on, the family themselves, they are attacked by these entities who appear to look exactly like them. We'll call them doppelgangers because that's essentially what they are. These doppelgangers appear before the house, and obviously failing to start any sort of form of conversation because they appear not to be intelligent, with the exception of Adelaide's doppelganger, of course. Winston Duke is for sure a highlight in this film. You will all remember him from Black Panther if you've actually seen it, and he does stand out here as well as he did in Black Panther. And I will say that the comedic elements, for me, I'm not someone who enjoys comedy in my horror. I prefer to keep the genre contained, so it's not something that I enjoy, but it wasn't forced. It felt organic. So if you do enjoy that sort of thing, I do believe that you will enjoy this as well, right? So his character was definitely a standout for sure. The family, of course, on being gathered in the living room, no explanation, just this family who appears to be supernatural of sorts because they're faster, much stronger than the original counterparts who are there, and the lead, who is Adelaide's doppelganger, essentially separates them in pairs, each with their own doppelganger. And this isn't explained or explored later on. I suspect that perhaps in order to take that person's place, or that the doppelganger has to be the one to take out the original, if the intention is to replace them. So she pairs them off with their own doppelganger, and as a sort of fight to the death, I suppose. And of course, things don't go according to plan. Winston Duke's character took essentially, whether intentional or not, took care of his doppelganger. And I will say that initially, on watching the film, or his duel with his doppelganger, I did think that at the end there, when he banged his head on the engine of the boat, that he was attempting to confuse or to make the doppelganger dizzy by making himself dizzy. And I say that because the son himself, on fighting his doppelganger, being locked in the closet with him, he realized that whatever action he does, the doppelganger will mimic that very same action. So I thought that his dad was doing the very same thing, but on recalling what I saw, I realized that, okay, That's not exactly what he was doing. He was simply just banging his head on the boat in the hopes that the engine would start and it would put the doppelganger off balance and he would fall back, and that did work. So what I thought wasn't actually what happened there, but it's something that wasn't never addressed because while the son was still alive, well, he was still alive, but I mean, he never he never gave that information to the rest of the family, and that certainly would have been very helpful, and it was never addressed as to why he didn't. Right, so I mean, later on in his final encounter with his doppelganger, he did the very same thing, to have him force him to walk back into the flames, and it was at that point that I figured out something was amiss because based on Adelaide's reaction to both the daughter's doppelganger dying and seeing the doppelganger of her son die. She seemed very remorseful and very hesitant to kill them, right, because they looked so much like her family. But it was something that was never explained. We never saw any of the other members of the family attempt to control their doppelganger, and it was never really explained as to why that was introduced, but not replicated or explained later on as to why he could do that, but not the others, or why they chose not to. Right. So later on, of course, the family realized that, okay, initially we thought we were the sole focus of these attackers, but the news essentially suggested that it was more widespread and everyone was being attacked, and they attempted to seek refuge at their friend's home, who had already been replaced. Essentially, and they had to escape from there. In that escape, they managed to do away with the doppelganger of the daughter, and later on the son. And of course, towards the end, the Adelaide's doppelganger took her son and escaped with him to the very house of mirror that Adelaide visited when she was a child. Now, on revisiting the House of Mirrors to find and rescue her son and put an end to this all, we would all imagine the typical horror films that we do watch. At the end, the protagonist, of course, confronts her demons or whatever the creature is that she's currently fighting, he or she is fighting, and then they would do away with the creature, and that would be the end of the film, happily ever after. So this film did put a twist on it to some extent. So of course, Adelaide follows her doppelganger back to this House of Mirrors that she had once visited as a child in order to rescue her son, and it's on revisiting the House of Mirrors that we're introduced to this underground facility that it appears as though the tether had originated from. Now, on encountering her final showdown with this entity, the supernatural being, they have this discussion, or she says to her that we were created, but we were created for some purpose, but then we were abandoned here, and she says that we bleed like you do. We are human like you are, but somehow we're not able to enjoy the same pleasantries that you as humans, so often take for granted. And I will admit that I do, at that point, I did wonder whether or not this was Peele's attempt at some commentary. And he did write and direct this, so I did wonder if this is a commentary on some of the not so pleasant events throughout American history. I know a lot of theories going around as to the representation of the title of the film, whether or not us is intended to mean U.S. as in the United States. So of course my mind did wander, okay, thinking back to the very first few minutes of the film, the wall crawl of the text that said that there were thousands of miles of underground tunnels across the U.S. with no perceived purpose. And we of course do know that following the abolition of slavery, these underground tunnels were used as a means to smuggle slaves to safety, right? Sympathizers, persons who supported that cause, supported abolishing slavery, use the tunnel as a means to help slaves to get out and to get to safety. All right. So I do wonder whether or not this was his attempt at stirring some conversation, a commentary on some of those not so pleasant times in the U.S. But that is just a theory, so we'll never know. But going back to Adelaide, Adelaide's encounter with her doppelganger, I mean, we do learn that she's responsible for this militia of sorts. Having taken years and years to plan and get to this point, to plot her revenge of sorts. Of course, it's only at the end that we do realize that, all right, this was revenge, because the doppelganger herself took Adelaide's place, and had her freedom, had her family, everything that she essentially should have had. And the reason during the flashbacks that she couldn't speak, so she had to go to a psychiatrist, was because the doppelganger herself couldn't speak initially, and she later on learned to do so. All right. The family, of course, unassuming, thought that she was traumatized by her experience in the House of Mirrors, and that is why she couldn't speak. But it turned out that the doppelganger instead took her place. Now, another thing that wasn't touched on, wasn't explained, was why Adelaide herself didn't attempt to escape. We know that, or at least I suspect that the House of Mirrors is the pathway, however it may be. We never really, there was nothing mystical about getting from the House of Mirrors to the underground facility. We saw Adelaide walk, and we now know that she knew how to get there, but there was no difficulty in getting in or out. So the movie never addressed how you crossed from one point to the other, and whether or not these were actual underground tunnels. And if that's the case, then she should have been able to escape years ago, or to walk back. So what is the determining factor? All right, what allows the doppelganger to cross from one point to the other? Is the facility some sort of, because it appears to be something of a mirror reflection of the real world, and we saw some flashbacks of her and her family at the fair at the end there, where we could see the original, and we saw the doppelgangers, and they were in mirrored situations, but the doppelgangers themselves were puppets of sorts, right? Only following along the strings that are being tugged on, and so it never addressed why Adelaide herself, being the original, being from this world, wasn't able to cross back over, to come back and to claim her place earlier on, right? Rather than taking the years that she took to actually come now, or even why she was able to do it now at this point. She's had the time, she's had this army all along. Why wait for her doppelganger to come back to this location to launch their assault, right? So clearly, a lot of unanswered questions where that is concerned. The film, for the most part, as I mentioned, it's disturbing. It's disturbing to some extent, but not scary, I would say. And that is in large due to the performance of the cast. Lupita herself was magnificent in the role. As I mentioned, Winston Duke did a terrific job, and the two kids as well, the daughter and the son, they also did a great job. So the cast in its entirety did an excellent job here, especially the daughter. The daughter did a great job playing both herself and the doppelganger, and the doppelganger, of course, being just being unsettling, right? So they all did a great job playing polar opposites of themselves. So I was really impressed by that. So as I said, Lupita's character, her mannerisms, her speech, the movements, as I mentioned, the puppets before. So the movements of the characters are almost puppet-like, as though they were being tugged, their strings were being tugged on, and they were being pulled in different directions, unnatural directions, right? So the performance in and of itself of the entire cast was just excellent, and that elevated the film, but it did leave a lot of questions unanswered. And I mentioned the young lady who played the younger version of Lupita, Madison Curry, and that I was most impressed by her throughout the film. And my reason for this being, if I remember correctly, she had only one line in the movie, right? Everything else, I believe it was one line at the fair with her dad, where her mom was attempting to take her with her to the restroom, and she was like, I don't have to go, and she stayed with her dad. I do believe that was the only line she had in the film, and we did see her quite a bit. So for the most part, she had to convey to the audience through her expression, her emotion, right? And she just did an excellent job doing that, right? So for someone with so few lines, she did an excellent job at her age, right? So I was very impressed with her. So I have to say kudos, hats off to her. She did an excellent job performing her role, and that is both the original and as a doppelganger. I suspect that the few scenes that we saw, the doppelganger's face that looked distorted, that was editing at work and not so much her. But at the very same time, all the other scenes, she still did a splendid job there. So I'll certainly leave us with a lot of unanswered questions. What was the underground facility? Who created the facility? Is it connected to the underground tunnels in some way? Why was Adelaide not able to escape prior to now? Why was the doppelganger able to access the facility that easily? And if that was the case, should Adelaide not have been able to cross over just as easily? What was up with all the white rabbits, for example? So the film definitely leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. However, with a strong cast and brilliant performances and direction, they certainly managed to elevate the film. Were a sequel announced, I wouldn't totally oppose it. I do feel as though this film was, self-contained in its own right, despite the current state of the world that we were shown, where the doppelgangers were lined up across the country. I do still feel as though the story was contained in and of itself, and not. I don't feel every story needs to have the protagonist winning against evil. And in this case, the protagonist is actually already dead, so there was no way in going that direction. But believe me, on watching the film, you will be going a few days without actually looking at your reflection in the mirror. And so if one was announced, I would be all for it, but I don't feel as though it absolutely needs a sequel. Us, the movie, have you seen it? If not, be sure to check it out. Post down in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you feel as though all your questions were answered in the film, or would you be open to a sequel to expand on this world, or to see what the world is now like with all the doppelgangers existing in the same world we are now? If you like the content you see here, be sure to hit like or subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.